right, so thanks a lot for inviting me. It's really a great conference. I'd like to do some kind of a tutorial on optimal transport, explain a bit what are the possibilities and what are the problems in high dimension, and some possible workaround that we've been doing with my team. So it's a collaboration with a lot of people, in particular Marco Cuturi, who was my collaborator on this project, and Ogen Vest, so some of the results are the PhD thesis of Aude. So before I start, some advertisement for a book we've recently written with Marco. So if you want to know more about the computational aspect and also a bit of the theory of what I will talk today, please just go to this webpage and you can find the book. So you learn a lot about optimal transport here. Before I start, let's try to motivate why I think in machine learning and in data science, there's many areas where you actually need to compare, to modify, to fit probability distribution. You have many problems that can be framed using this language. So of course, low-dimensional problems in imaging, where you represent features as distribution of colors, for instance, for images. Also for shape matching, it's really useful to represent the shape as some kind of collection of mass you'd like to register. But I would say more importantly for supervised learning and also more recently for unsupervised learning, you want to manipulate very large-scale distribution. Typical example is this revolution in natural language processing where you represent text as collection of points in a high-dimensional space, and you'd like to somehow compare them or model them. And also, of course, for generative models, for instance, generative models for images, for instance, you'd like to understand the geometry of very high distribution of images. And this is a typical example. So in general setup, the problem is like density fitting or parametric model fitting for unsupervised learning or for shape matching, where you'd like to register some templates, alpha, theta, depending on some parameter, to your input, which is like a collection of points, a large point cloud. And to do this, you will frame the problem as some kind of an optimization, where you look for the optimal parameter theta to fit as best as possible the point. So of course, this raises the question of what should be the distance or the metric you want to use between probability distribution. And the very important point that I want to make is to solve this problem efficiently, you need to use some distance that leverage your knowledge about the data, that leverage the fact that the point live in some space with some ground distance. So for instance, for images, could be just the Euclidean distance between the color or maybe some more perceptual distance. For text, as I say, people have worked a lot on word embedding, so trying to understand meaningful distance on words. And for generative model, of course, it's an open problem of what should be the metric you use between image. But there is this revolution of GANs, which is really the idea of introducing back geometry to model and compare images. So in all these problems, you'd like to use this distance between points and somehow lift it to a distance between group of points or distribution. And this is exactly the goal of optimal transport to achieve this lifting. Okay, so I will first introduce optimal transports in its modern form, so Kantorovich formulation, and then I will speak a bit about the way we approximate it for high-dimensional problem. Okay, so the problem here is comparing two distributions. For simplicity, let's say discrete distribution. They are weighted, so you have weight. If the sum should be equal, they are positive number and they sum to 1, so they are histograms. And the way Kantorovich formulated this problem of transport, and it's really a revolution, he got the Nobel Prize in economy for this, is through a coupling matrix. So this coupling matrix is an array of positive numbers, and each time you have a non-zero element in this matrix, it means you would transfer some amount of mass. So here you have a single non-zero element, that all the mass of this guy get mapped to this guy. So it's kind of a sometime, and this is really the revolution of mass. And for instance, here you see the mass of this guy is split in two. The way Kantorovich describes the transport of mass is through this set of matrices, coupling matrices, that should be positive and that should satisfy the constraint of conservation of mass, which means that the sum of the row should be equal to A and the sum of the column should be equal to right in matrix form like this. Why is it useful? It's because it's just a gigantic polytope, so it's a convex. Describes the movement of mass in a convex way. So this is why he got the Nobel Prize. Of course, you could say it's also because there has been a lot of revolution in optimization, because what you would do after is you would use this convex set and you would look for the optimal coupling by saying you have to pay some amount of mass when you transfer some mass. Okay? And the most natural way to do this is that the price you pay is proportional to some power of the distance for the best possible P. And this is a convex problem, it's a linear problem. So thanks to the revolution also of George Dantzig that introduced the simplex solver, you can actually solve it. But the problem is for very large scale situation, like the one you have in data science, the complexity of this method is cubic, is n cubed. So it really doesn't really scale to large data sets. And also the problem we'll discuss later is that it doesn't also work in high dimension for statistical reasons. So you need somehow to find workaround to solve efficiently, so with faster algorithm, and also algorithms that would be more stable in high dimension. And this is what I will discuss next, is how do you change this idea of Kantorovich to make it tractable in high dimension for machine learning, for instance. And you can trace, before speaking about this, so it's useful because it provides for you this idea of transfer of mass. So it could be interesting if you want to extrapolate, for instance, between distributions. I would say that something that is even more important, and it's really why you want to use optimal transport, that not only the optimal coupling is important, so this optimal array of numbers. So if you deal with continuous distribution, you would just replace sum by integral. So everything that I say, coupling p or pi for continuous distribution, and the value of the optimal coupling, the value of this optimization problem, find something that is very important, which is the Wasserstein distance. So if you take the power 1 over p of this quantity, get a number that is a distance, as I say, it was introduced by Wasserstein. But why should you care about the distance? It's important because it's a geometric distance. In terms of mathematics, it's a distance that defines the topology of the convergence in law. So for those who are probabilists, they are probably used to manipulating the convergence in law if you do like central unit. Wasserstein distance is really the way to quantify the convergence in law. For those who are not probabilists, what is the convergence in law? It's what we call quick way to measure convergence. But a very simple example to explain what it is. If you have a Dirac, so a deterministic distribution on a single point, where the position of the Dirac converges, then according to the convergence. You could say, okay, I know a lot of distance between probability distribution. Why should I use the Wasserstein distance? Maybe the simplest distance between probabilities is just the L1 norm. And if you take the L1 norm between two Diracs, if the two Diracs don't overlap, if they are not exactly at the same point, well, the L1 norm of the distance between two Dirac is just 2. So according to the L1 norm, Dirac never converge geometrically because they would never overlap. But if you look at the Wasserstein distance between two Diracs, there is a single way to transfer the mass. The Wasserstein distance between two Dirac will just be the ground distance. Here, according to the Wasserstein distance, Dirac will converge to this one. It's really somehow the way to measure in a quantitative way the geometric convergence of distribution. I want to argue that for many situations, especially in high dimension for machine learning, it's really the kind of things you would like because you want to register your data together. Okay. Kind of a motivation of why you really care about having this kind of distance for many applications. Okay, so how do you make it tractable for large-scale learning? How do you have a fast algorithm and algorithms that scale also in a statistical way when you discretize your problem? And you can trace this idea that we have developed with Marco all the way to Schrödinger, because this problem was actually introduced by Schrödinger in the lazy gas model, where he wanted to understand what is the most likely trajectory of a gas between two given configurations. To solve optimal transport, but in fact, it's a way to approximate it. What is this idea? It's very simple. You just take the linear problem you want to solve, which is kind of a very flat optimization problem, very hard to solve, and you make it more friendly by adding a penalty. And the natural penalty to solve the problem is the entropy. So you add the classical Shannon-Boltzmann entropy with respect to epsilon parameter. So if epsilon goes to 0, you will recover the optimal transport, and the problem will be harder and harder. And as you increase the temperature, as you increase epsilon, points will start speaking to each other. You will introduce some kind of diffusion, which will make the algorithm faster and would make the solution much more stable. Okay. And this is a typical example that you have. So here it's the transport between two discrete set of points. So in this case, there is a famous theorem by Birkhoff and von Neumann that says that the optimal solution of Kantorovich is actually a bijection. So the optimal transport in here is very sparse. You link every point to a single other point, which make it very unstable because you look for an exact bijection. And as you introduce more and more temperature, you see the solution would make points speak more and more with neighbors. So the solution would be more and more stable, and the algorithm would actually be faster. When you want to compare points clouds, if you want to compare two distributions, 1D distribution, it's like a mixture of Gaussian. There is also a very famous theorem due to famous French mathematician Yann Brenier in 91 that proves that the solution of Kantorovich is localized along a curve, along a very sparse, and once again, it's very hard to find. And if you increase the temperature, you would see that the effect on the solution of Schrödinger is to more and more blur the result. Somehow denoise the optimal transport, and once again, make it more scalable and simpler to compute. So really the effect of entropy is to introduce diffusion in the solution of optimal transport. So of course you can view it as a way to approximate optimal transport, but as you might guess, as epsilon goes to 0, the method would be more and more difficult, less and less effective. So really the goal of my talk is to say, maybe you should just forget about optimal transport. Maybe what you are looking for is something else, and maybe you are looking for something that could be somehow in between. Okay? Kind of trade-off I want to discuss today. I want to say, okay, optimal transport is maybe not the best tool, certainly not if you are in high dimension. Okay, so before going on, just a few words about why there are simple algorithms to solve it. I would not discuss in detail, but just to say the main idea. The idea is you start by this optimization problem, which is basically a maximum entropy problem. And if you have a maximum entropy problem, you know that the solution will be defined through a Gibbs kernel. So you know that you are a solution of this Schrödinger problem if and only if you can factor the solution as a Gibbs kernel, multiply on the left by some scalars and on the right by some other scalars. So really what you are looking for is for the normalization of your kernel U and V. So what is the Gibbs kernel? It's just exponential minus the cost divided by epsilon. So if you are in Euclidean space and you take p equal to, Schrödinger problem is just about normalizing a Gaussian convolution kernel. Okay? And it has been studied a lot, so it's really a very important problem of how you can scale Gibbs kernel. And here it says, okay, it's a solution of a convex problem, so it's kind of nice. But even nicer is then if you look for the conservation of mass equations, they become very simple. If you plug these two guys into the conservation of mass, you see it becomes just two equations, which is the vector u multiplied point by the vector kv. Kv should be equal to a. Same, and you reverse the goal of Pn. Of course, what is difficult is to solve at the same time both equations. But a very naive idea at first is, okay, let's try to first solve this. And it's very simple. If you give me v, I just divide a by k times v, and then, of course, I get the optimal u. So you would have this very naive algorithm where you would iterate between normalizing on the left and then normalizing on the right. And usually, okay, there's no reason for this to work. It's not obvious that it's contractant, but in fact, it's a theorem that was proved by Sinkhorn in 64. It's a very landmark result that actually this algorithm converges to the unique solution. So Sinkhorn algorithm is this very simple algorithm where you progressively normalize on the left and normalize on the right your matrix. It's actually much older than Sinkhorn, but Sinkhorn is the guy that proved its convergence. And it's a way to actually solve approximately optimal transport. And what is very nice is that it scales very nicely to GPUs because the main bottleneck is the computation of a matrix time vector product. So of course, if you have tons of vectors to compare together, you would just map them to a GPU and compute matrix-matrix multiplication. So the goal of this algorithm is to be implemented on GPU. And this is really when you have a game changer. You can really use it for large-scale problems. Okay, so now, okay, it looks very nice. I can use it for my problem. It seems to be efficient. What is the bottleneck? The bottleneck is now it's not anymore a distance. You can see this clearly if you compare some distribution to itself. Because of the diffusion, it's not zero anymore. You have to pay some price. So if you use it for density fitting or for statistics or image processing, it's a disaster because you would have some bias because you would always find a density that is closer to yourself than yourself. So in fact, if you go, let epsilon goes to 0, the optimal solution would be a point. So you would have this kind of a very bad bias that you need to fight. And what we did with my PhD student Aude at first is, okay, let's try to simply remove this bias by subtracting the diagonal term. Why should it work? I mean, you put a minus sign and it becomes negative, so it looks weird. It's a normalization that's the one you would have in the kernel's method. But here it's not a kernel, so why would it work? And we tried on our computer, and it was working beautifully. It was always positive. You always have very good matching, so we'd say, okay, maybe there is some mathematical result. Before actually saying the main result, let me do a comment on what is the two limit of this new Sinkhorn divergence that we've introduced. The first one is obvious. If you let epsilon goes to 0, you will converge to optimal transport. Actually, the proof is quite technical but it's quite intuitive. What is more interesting is the high temperature limit. In this case, what you discover by is you converge to Euclidean distance, Euclidean norm. Kernel norm in statistics is often referred to as maximum mean discrepancy by Arthur Breton. What it is, it's take your favorite kernel and you just integrate twice this kernel on the different. Find a Euclidean norm, so it's kind of a very flat geometry that computes kernel interaction between all the particles together. Because the kernel you have to use in this case is minus the distance to the power p. Minus, why should it be positive? Distance minus the Euclidean distance to the power p is a positive kernel when p is between 0 and 2. As a name, it's usually called the energy distance. I don't know why they call it the distance. And in fact, people in analysis, they call this Sobolev norm. So actually, it's a Sobolev norm, although it's not obvious like this. It's a Sobolev norm, but of negative index, because of course now you compare points, so it's going to be. Two different words. Then the other result that we have proved is that actually it's something that you can really use it in practice because it's positive. It's not obvious, but if the kernel you use is a positive kernel, for instance, it's the case for a Gaussian kernel who is positive. So if it's a translation invariant kernel, being positive is just having a Fourier transform that is positive. So it's, and this quantity that we have introduced, although there are minus signs, always stay positive. Something that is geometrical because it's metrizes the convergence in law. Really, the geometry you are dealing with this Schrödinger ID is the geometry of the convergence in law. So it told you that this very simple trick is actually much more profound than it sounds. It's really a natural way to normalize this Sinkhorn score to make it something that you can use in practice. So this is for, like, I would say, the practical things. But why is it actually meaningful from a statistical perspective? So, okay, we don't have a clear picture, but at least it fixes the biggest problem of optimal transport in high dimension, is that optimal transport doesn't scale with dimension, it suffers from the curse of dimensionality. And the reason is very simple, is I mean, if you do machine learning or statistical learning, what you typically want to do is to compare like distributions that are continuous or maybe with billions of points. And what you would do is you would do some algorithm that progressively takes some data. So what you would have access is a discrete distribution. So the first thing you have to look for is what is the price you have to pay to replace some kind of ideal density, even maybe a very simple uniform density, by a discrete one. And the bad news is with optimal transport, it scales exponentially with the dimension, meaning that the distance between the discrete and the continuous quantity are 1 over n to the power 1 over d. So even if you are in dimension 5 or 6, this tells you that the number of points you would need to use to discover that actually you are a uniform distribution is just enormous. Okay? So it just means that it's not possible to use it in very high dimension unless you have very specific assumptions on your data. But if nobody tells you before that it's uniform, okay, you cannot guess it by optimal transport. On the contrary, Euclidean distances like kernel norms, because they are Euclidean, they don't suffer from this. They scale with the usual scaling of statistics, which is 1 over square root of n. So kernel method, because they are very global, they don't suffer from the curse of dimensionality. And then you might guess that, of course, Sinkhorn, since it's interpolate between the two, should have a sample complexity that interpolates between the two, which is exactly the theorem we have proved with Aude, Francis, and Marco, which is the fact that the sample complexity, as soon as you introduce a little bit of diffusion, become 1 over square root of n. But of course, there is no free lunch because the constant will explode with epsilon. This would not be something to solve the problem of optimal transport, because if you let epsilon goes to 0, of course, you would pay a price that becomes dependent on the dimension. The result is very natural. It just says to you that this quantity, this divergence, is something that you can hope to use to solve high-dimensional problem. Now the question is, does it really work? I mean, it doesn't tell you that Sinkhorn does work or optimal transport does work. It just tells you that you can use them. It doesn't suffer from the curse of dimensionality. Okay? So now I'd like to conclude with some kind of illustration of what you can use in machine learning. It's by no means a definitive answer. Actually, I think optimal transport is not really something that brings interesting conclusion for GANs or generative model. But let's try to explain why you can model GANs using optimal transport. So the key problem, I would say, in supervised learning is to understand the geometry of high-dimensional distribution. So somehow to model this distribution using some parametric parameters. So for instance, it could be a Gaussian. In this case, theta would be the mean and the variance. And then, of course, the problem is very simple. You just use the empirical and the empirical covariance. But for more complicated models, parameterized maybe by a deep net, of course, it's become much more complicated. So I would say what people would do in statistics is to frame this as a maximum likelihood estimators. You would say, okay, my points are observed like independently one from each other, and I will maximize the likelihood. So I would minimize minus the log likelihood, which is more or less equivalent to doing a density fitting with a discretized Kullback-Leibler divergence. Okay, so this is the way you describe many parameter estimation problems. So what is the problem with the generative model? So first of all, what are generative models? Generative model is this idea that you would describe the density, your parametric density, not using a closed form, but rather using an algorithm, using the fact that you would draw new samples by drawing samples in low dimension, for image processing, maybe dimension 100 or 1000, and then you would map them to a high dimensional space using a deep net. Then, of course, the distribution you would obtain, which is somehow the push forward of this low dimensional distribution, becomes very complicated, very singular. And when you move theta, this kind of surface would move like in a very complicated way. So there's no way you could even speak about having some kind of a density with respect to all be mutually singular with each other. So this guy would typically be undefined. Why you need to frame this not as a maximum likelihood, but as a minimum distance estimator, which would have a solution. And this distance that you need to use needs to be smooth with respect to the convergence in law. You need to use a loss function that would be smooth when you move your function. And as I told you from the beginning, this is exactly what optimal transport is made for. It's made to design loss functions that are smooth for this. So of course, you could think about using the Singh-Grand divergence here. But then everything gets messy because you would use maybe deep nets to model the problems. So you would use generative net to somehow deconvolve the low-dimensional feature space to obtain high-dimensional images. And problems become very, very hard to solve. Okay, so now what you are looking for is for the parameter of your deep net that generate your data, and you want to optimize for them. And the problem is the optimization problem is intractable. There is no algorithm that is known to solve this. Nobody really knows what's happening. So I have no clues about why actually it works. And probably optimal transport is not something that will tell you why it works. It's just a way to frame the problem. So it's just some scary picture to show that this problem is almost, we are very far from having algorithms that can probably solve it. What we do in practice is we use stochastic optimization. We sample points, we generate new samples, and we somehow do a gradient descent, and it gives you something at the end to produce nice images. But okay, it's still way beyond our league to understand what's happening from an optimization perspective. We just try to do this. These are typical examples that you would generate. These are for MNIST. In this case, it works quite well. I mean, any reasonable algorithm would work well. And one of the reasons is actually you can just use the L2 norm to compare these images because they are very simple in this case. But the problem becomes when you have more complicated images, natural images or images of celebrity, where the L2 norm just doesn't work. And of course, then you need to use another network to design the loss function, to design the cost. Because optimal transport doesn't solve for you the problem of what cost you want to use. So here we follow the path of GANs, where you use another networks to define the distance you want to use. And you train this second network in an adversarial way to maximize, to be maximally discriminant. And here, of course, you go way beyond the theory of optimal transport. You don't really understand what's happening, except in practice, it generates nice images. And of course, the narrative I would like to tell you is epsilon plays a role. It has some roles. And you can check using your favorite score function for GAN that indeed epsilon has a role. But in fact, these scores, they are just not really meaningful. Nobody knows how to evaluate GANs. But it seems obvious that epsilon should play a role here, because when epsilon goes to zero, optimal transport is not really meaningful in high dimension. Okay, so I would conclude with some open problems, because I think it just raises open problem. No, everything is open in this area. The first, I would say, big question is really optimal transport useful in high dimension? I think the idea of using laws that integrate the geometry, of course, it's useful. I think optimal transport is a nice way to frame the problem. So I guess it's a tool that people should use more. Does it solve problem of generative model? I don't think so, but at least it brings into the picture the question of comparing a measure using some geometric loss function. The big question is, what metric should you use? In many situations, we know what is the metric. So for low dimensional problem like shapes, or even medium dimensional problem, maybe you already know a good metric. So here, I would say optimal transport is a clear winner. But for very high dimension problem, well, the only way people have come up so far is by using adversarial networks to learn the cost. What can you say about this in mathematics? It's very unclear. And the last but not least problem is, how do you go beyond just comparing points? How do you compare more complex distribution, for instance, shapes that even maybe don't live in the same world? Or there was a lot of problem on quantum chemistry. What should be the measure metric you want to compare molecules, for instance? And here there is a very nice extension of the theory of optimal transport, which is a kind of a hybridation with the idea of Gromov of comparing metric spaces. The problem is it becomes NP-hard to compute because it's like a graph matching. So of course, everything becomes like a nightmare, but I think it raises a lot of interesting questions of how you can go beyond comparing measure by comparing not points, but like graphs and things like this. Okay, thanks for your attention, and I will stop here.
Of the issue of your epsilon to the power 1 over d, if the epsilon, depending upon the region, could change, then maybe you would avoid having large regions where the epsilon was smaller. So have you tried, or is it feasible to do such a thing?
In low dimension, people have tried. There are many, heuristics people have used to compare shapes by trying to adapt locally the epsilon. In high dimension for machine learning, I've never seen any convincing idea to do this. But of course, yeah, this idea, of course, it has been introduced, as I say, by Schrödinger. But in fact, if you look at all the computer vision literatures, this idea of soft matching, like softening the match and trying to adapt the epsilon, have already been tried. But it's, to my knowledge, it's only like in 2D or 3D. Okay. It's not clear how you can do this. You could use like some curvature estimate or something like this, but okay, in high dimension. So for now, in high dimension, we don't know how to do it.
How are you backpropagating through the iterations?
Yeah, so there's two. So it was more or less hidden in this slide. There's two options for it. Either you see, I would say, Synchron as another deep network that you add on top, and you do backprop. The issue with this is, of course, if you do a lot of iteration of Synchron, maybe because if epsilon is not too large, then this will stack a lot of layers, and in terms of memory, it will explode. The other option is to let Synchron converge enough, and then using the theoretical gradient. And actually, you can show that the theoretical gradient of Synchron is the logarithm of A and B. So, okay, that's basically the two options you could have, which is the basic way. Either you just skip the backprop, or you made it if you have enough memory. Well, it's quite obvious, actually, if you look. Sorry, it's not obvious, but it's just because when epsilon goes to infinity, this term will dominate, so you will have P that is equal to A times B. Here, it's very important to use the relative entropy with respect to the input. In fact, when you speak about entropy, you always have to say with respect to X. Okay, you need to show the proof, but this term will become negligible. P will become A times B, so the cost will become AB times P, so it will become an inner product. This term, when epsilon goes to infinity, it converges to an inner product, and it's become a kernel. Because you subtract the diagonal, you converge to the L2 norm. Well, for supervised learning, you use cross-validation. For unsupervised learning, I don't know. Because the problem is like chicken and egg problem. For GANs, nobody know what criteria. I could say, okay, maybe I love so much optimal transport that I should cross-validate with respect to optimal transport, but as I say, it's impossible to test. And also why people should use optimal transport to test GAN, I don't know. So you could use a Fréchet inception score and just optimize epsilon on this, but I think it's not, there is no solution to this problem for unsupervised learning.